zoom out to the two-shot.
Just say when.
Roger, just iris down a hair. Oh, other way. A little bit too much. Just open up. Good. And just cue Jack, Ken.
Robert Novack, it's certainly a happy occasion to have you back at your alma mater, and certainly on a wonderful day as a new laureate of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois.
Well, I'm really honored.
I'd like to talk to you about your early influences. You grew up in Joliet, not too far up the road from here. How did you first get interested in journalism?
I can't remember when I wasn't interested in journalism. We used to do a little neighborhood paper, which I was the editor of, and we had a little neighborhood gossip, and my mother typed it up, and we distributed it around, and by the time I was a freshman in high school, I was writing sports for a weekly newspaper, and then I graduated into the daily newspaper, and they thought I had some promise, so they hired me as a part-time employee by the time I was 16 years old.
Who were your early influences?
Well, I was tremendously influenced. This sounds crazy, by Drew Pearson. I thought he was terrific because he had a column. They ran the column in my hometown paper, the Joliet Herald News, and he had all this inside information that nobody else knew. I said, wouldn't that be a great thing to have a job where you found out things other people didn't know? And then he was on the radio every Sunday night with more inside information. So I wasn't very ideological at all, but I just thought he was a lot of fun. And it sounds a little converse. As I got a little older, somebody was the polar opposite of Drew Pearson was Walter Lippmann, and I was very impressed by his cool, dispassionate analysis. So those were two early influences. Very interesting that they were columnists.
You came to school at the University of Illinois. You worked on the daily paper here. Tell me about that experience. Were there any particular professors who left their mark on you?
Yeah, I didn't go to journalism school because I'd been working on the Joliet paper, and I thought I knew all the nuts and bolts that they would teach me in journalism school. That's a terrible thing to say, I guess. But so I majored in English, and they had a professor here named George Skoufis. I don't know if the name means anything to you. He just passed away about 2 years ago. He got a great deal, several awards, and he taught literature, and he taught writing and creative writing, and he had a great influence on me and cleaning up my prose. I knew all the nuts and bolts how to write a newspaper story, who, how, when, and all that, but I needed a lot of help in really learning how to write, and I think George Skoufis really taught me how to write. And in the years that I started coming back here until he passed away, we always met, and he had a great influence also on another much better writer than I am, who is now dead, named Stanley Elkin, the great novelist, one of the really great American novelists. He was in the same writing class with me, with Professor Skoufis.
You were in the service, and then you went to work for the Associated Press. Do I have the chronology right?
Exactly.
What was writing? How was writing for the Wire different?
Well, the great thing about writing for the Wire was that you had to be fast. Particularly, my first bureau was Omaha, which was a very small bureau, and I was writing the Radio Wire, and I was writing news stories at the same time. I would, in a given day, it was not surprising that I'd write 20, 25 stories in a day. So speed was the premium, and accuracy, because you didn't have much editing. It went pretty well straight from your typewriter to the wire.
When you started, when did you start working in politics, covering the legislatures?
After working 3 months in Omaha, they thought I was a fast young reporter, and didn't take very inexpensive transfer, so they sent me to Lincoln to cover the legislative session, which lasted 6 months. That was my first legislature, and that helped me to get transferred to Indianapolis, where I also covered the legislature and politics, and then from there, when I was 26 years old, to Washington bureau, which was very unusual in those days. In journalism, you got to be lucky, and that was extraordinarily lucky. Not so unusual today to be a 26-year-old reporter in the Washington bureau of the AP.
When you got into politics, started covering politics, what lit a fire in you there?
Well, what lit a fire was what fascinated me about Drew Pearson when I was a kid, and what still lights a fire in me at my advanced age, and that is finding out things that nobody else knows. Now, I have become ideological as time has gone by. I'm not. I think anybody who deals with politics and ends up with no opinions and ideas is a neuter. But still, what gets me excited is when I really find out something that other people don't know, and that's why. Even though I'm a columnist, I still think of myself as a reporter.
One of the things I like about your columns is the fact that you are still reporting. You're not just sitting in some ivory tower, as you said, contemplating your navel like some of your colleagues might do. You're actually talking to people and working the story.
Well, that's all I know how to do. And when we started our column with Roland Evans, I had spent, after the AP, I went with the Wall Street Journal, and I spent 5 years with the Journal, and then Evans and I started this column, which was kind of a shot in the dark. But we decided that we would, in every column, have at least one fact that had never been published anywhere. And I still try to do that, and I do it. Now, some people think some of the facts that are unpublished are trivial. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're important. But that's kind of a little discipline that I use that makes you go out and do some reporting.
Tell me about the partnership with Evans.
I was only 31 years old, and actually 32 years old, and he was 10 years older than I, and I didn't know him very well, and he came to me. He was with the Herald Tribune, and he said that he'd been trying to get a column with the Herald Tribune for all these years, and they wanted him to do a column, and they wanted it 6 times a week, and they wanted it a news-oriented column. He couldn't do that, and he wondered if I would become his partner. And those are the kind of decisions you make that affect your whole life, because I had a great future with the Wall Street Journal, but what appealed to me about it was the idea that I would be on my own. I'd be an independent contractor, so to speak, although I'd have a partner, but I wouldn't be an employee as much. And so it was a shot in the dark. I know my parents always thought that things I was doing, even going into journalism, was insane, but they really thought leaving the Wall Street Journal for this didn't make much sense. But and I think I would have had a good career and a good life if I had stayed at the Journal. But this was something that I think was the right decision.
I want to take one little step back, and that is when you came to Washington, and that was what, 57?
57.
57? What was Washington like then compared to what it is like today?
Oh, it's so different. It was still an overgrown southern town. Didn't have the fancy shishi restaurants. You didn't have the big law firms. Government was much smaller, and there was just the color green, as green in money, not in chlorophyll, was much less of a factor in those days. New York has always been a money town. Now Washington is a money town. It wasn't in those days. It was a much simpler place, and I came with the Wall Street with the Associated Press, and about my second week there, they assigned me as the number 3 man on the Senate Rackets Committee, which means I did the overnight stories and filled in when the big shots were writing the leads. Great assignment for a 26-year-old. So I got to meet immediately Jack Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Barry Goldwater, Edward Benner Williams, Jimmy Hoffa. Pierre Salinger. Those were my news sources. So it was really exciting.
Bob Michael, who was also a Lincoln laureate, former House Minority Leader, was telling me when we had this interview. He said there was much more civility. There was an opportunity to, after you had it out on the floor, you could go over to Sam Rayburn's office and have a little whiskey and sit down and talk like gentlemen.
That's true, and it was more civility between the media and the journalists and the politicians. Politicians in those days, people used to drink more than they do now. I don't know if that was good or bad, but they would have these little salons in their office at the end of the day, and very often a senator or a congressman would invite as a regular or a semi-regular a reporter that he liked. For example, I was a semi-regular in the late afternoon drinking in Senator Dirksen's office. Dirksen liked me. I was from Illinois. He was from Illinois, and I could keep a secret. And I learned a lot. I learned about how the system worked. The other thing that was different in those days, 42 years ago, is that there was more of a social life among the politicians, sometimes inviting the press in. They didn't go home every weekend. Now they go home every weekend. And there was much less fundraising because there was much less money. So there was much more of a social life of entertaining in their home and not having this constant fundraisers. I think being a member of Congress in those days was a lot of fun. I don't know if I'd recommend it to anybody right now.
That is, and that's one of the things that it's tough when people like Bob Michael and Paul Simon, people who have gone from politics to education, are trying to get young people interested in a life of public service. It's darn hard to do that given the amount of scrutiny and the winner-take-all, take-no-prisoners kind of mentality that takes place.
And all of the above that you've mentioned, plus they need to raise these enormous amounts of money. And the reason for that is the camera. That it costs, you must, even to run for Congress in a contested area, you must go on television, and television is expensive. And so the story of Washington now is a much bigger symbiotic relation with lobbyists, because the lobbyists raise the money, they contribute the money, and therefore they have access.
What's the remedy?
Well, I have a remedy that 70% of the American people think it's a good idea, and about 0% of the politicians think it's a good idea, and that's term limits. Now, you say, you mean you would have tremendous figures like Bob Michael and Henry Hyde from Illinois, and just have their careers cut off at whatever it is, 6 years or 8 years. That's a loss. But I believe the payoff is that you would have people who are indeed citizen legislators, as they were in an earlier day in the previous century, who come to Washington for a brief time and are not that dependent on the job, are not that hooked to raising all this money. Now, I'll say something else, and as a conservative, I don't swim with my brethren on this. I'm for campaign finance reform. I'm for real campaign finance reform, which affects organized labor and affects business as well. I think some kind of restrictions on the present system are necessary, but I believe that if it is molded into a reform of term limits, it would work better.
Talking about soft money.
Soft money, PAC money, the kind of you have campaigns for the Senate where almost all the money is raised outside of the person's state in Hollywood or New York. There are reforms that can be done without violating the First Amendment, but the politicians are almost opposed to that as they are opposed to term limits.
I want to talk to you about some of the interesting people you've met. Your interview with Deng Xiaoping was one that, in many ways, people have credited that for opening up a real rapprochement, a rapport with China. How do you feel about influencing the path of history by what you've done?
Well, that was probably the biggest thing I ever did. He gave me, he had never had an interview with a Western correspondent before. He gave me 2 hours, and he laid out what it would take, because we didn't have diplomatic relations then, formal diplomatic relations, and he sent a message what it would take to establish normalization, and he made it very clear that we didn't have to abandon Taiwan. We didn't have to abandon South Korea. It was a much more mild proposal than it was. So I felt good in influencing that in a positive way. I get worried sometimes about influencing the course of history. I often say I unintentionally elected Jimmy Carter. Now, let me tell you how. I did a column about something I call the Sonnenfeld Doctrine. Sonnenfeld was a high-ranking State Department official, and he had written a secret memo saying that we should not interfere with the part of Europe that was now under communist control, Soviet control, like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary. We should let them have their area. And I wrote this, and it was a sensational column. Jimmy Carter started bothering Ford whether he believed in the Sonnenfeld Doctrine. So in their first debate, Ford was challenged on it, President Ford. The problem was that he got it mixed up. Instead of saying we don't think that it should be communist, he said Poland is not communist. And if you remember, that is not Soviet controlled, and that really, for the first time, put Carter in the lead.
That must be a funny feeling.
It is, particularly when it's unintentional.
I know we don't have very much more time left, but I want to ask you, what has given you the most satisfaction about the kind of work that you're allowed to do?
I guess it's the greatest satisfaction in my closing year, in my final years. I guess I've been at it now for a long. I'm 68 years old and working harder than I've ever worked. But I really do believe that apart from doing scoops and meeting fascinating people like Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon and having a front seat in history, I really believe that the most important thing in this country is freedom. I worry about whether we're losing our freedom, whether the government is intruding on it, whether people are worried enough, and whatever small contributions I think I can make to saying that freedom is important too. How we, the freedom to use our money, the freedom to live our lives as we see fit, which is really the great American tradition. If I have just a tiny influence on that, that is very satisfying.
In terms of the last remarkable year that we've had in politics in this country, what kind of lead would you write for the Clinton presidency?
I would say a lost opportunity, a failed presidency, in that this man came into the presidency with tremendous ambitions to be not just a two-term president, but a great president, to go down as one of the great presidents. And because of his personal failings, because he could not transcend petty politics and personal shortcomings, it would be a disappointing presidency. And if, as we sit here today, this, what I think, insane war in the Balkans continues, it will be a truly failed presidency.
One thing I'd like to follow up on, you're hard on the Democrats, but you appear to me to be equally hard on your fellow Republicans.
Yeah, I'm pretty hard on the Republicans. The Republicans say I'm an anti-Republican conservative, and I'll buy that anytime. I think journalists should be hard on politicians. They know what I stand for. I stand for tax cuts, less government, deregulation, and freedom. That's not exactly the liberal agenda, but it isn't very much the Republican agenda either, because when it comes down to it, they like government too, and they like their political perquisites. So I think to be an accurate reporter, to tell the truth, and not worry about whether you are spoiling the prospects for one part or the other, is what we're supposed to do. Let me just say one thing. One of the Republican leaders called me up last year, and he said that I was too rough on the Republicans. He said, the trouble with you, Bob, is that you've been tackling the congressional leaders for years with the ball. You get them in the dirt and you knock them down. He said, but you're still tackling us, and now you're tackling your own team. And I said, Senator, let me tell you something. I'm not on your team. And that is the truth. I'm not on anybody's team, and I don't think any journalist should be on anybody's team.
As a native son of Illinois, what does becoming a Lincoln Laureate mean to you?
Well, it means a great deal to me. The last full year I lived in Illinois, a whole 12 months, was 1951. That's a long time ago. Lived in Washington for 42 years. But when somebody says to me, where are you from? I always say, Illinois. I don't consider myself a Washingtonian, certainly. I'm from Illinois. And so I'm terribly proud. I don't know if I'm honestly don't know whether just a journalist is deserving of this, considering that other people are getting the honor. But I'm terribly proud of it because Illinois means a lot to me. Not only the fact that my grandfather was an immigrant and worked made tractors in the Moline John Deere plant, and sent 4 sons to the University of Illinois, all of whom got degrees. I'm a University of Illinois graduate, but I do believe that the prairie tradition, the tradition of self-reliance, of independence, and of freedom has had a great influence in me in shaping the kind of person I've tried to be and the kind of journalist I've tried to be.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed